people of Hawaii may be relieved about the false alarm, but they are also angry. All of this was avoidable, from the false alarm itself to the series of mistakes at multiple junctures surrounding the incident.
One of the recommendations coming out of the recent Hazards Preparedness study is that all emergency management stakeholders be involved in future planning. Tonight, representatives from the Departments of Education and Transportation join the interim administrator for Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency. This live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS. I'm Daryl Huff with Hawaii News Now. Last month at about 8:05 on a quiet Saturday morning, Hawaii was put into a state of confusion and fear when a false ballistic missile alert was issued statewide by the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. That single mistake was preceded and compounded by mismanaged and poor planning, which left the agency unable to take back the false alarm for 38 long minutes. The incident attracted worldwide media attention. It was not one of Hawaii's finest hours. As it turns out, this human error and the bungled reaction proved to be a significant wake-up call, revealing just how unprepared we are for a catastrophic event. Investigations by State Defense Department leaders identified areas of significant vulnerability with recommendations that included new leadership at the Emergency Management Agency and a new strategic plan. That report was released just 2 days ago. Tonight we have representatives from 3 state agencies you definitely want to hear from. And we look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Brigadier General Moses Ka'oiwi, Director of the Joint Staff of the Hawaii National Guard, was appointed Interim Administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, replacing the former administrator who resigned January 30th. Dan Carlson is the Assistant Superintendent with the Hawaii State Department of Education's Office of School Facilities and Support Services. Daryl Young is Deputy Director, Harbors Division for the State Department of Transportation. Hawaii harbors, by the way, emerged from this report as a critical area of concern linked to our food and fuel supplies. Tim Sakahara is the Public Information Officer for the State Department of Transportation. He will be helping out tonight since the DOT also oversees our roads and airports. Now, let me start out, and I'll start with you, General Ka'oiwi. That morning, we all have our stories about that morning, yes. But professionally, what were you going through? How did you get the alert, and what was going through your mind, maybe a little personally, but also professionally?
Well, interestingly, I was sitting in a meeting, actually, with General Logan, General Hara, and some of the Air Guard commanders at that time.
General Logan was the head of the agency, head of the whole Defense Department at that
yes.
time.
Yeah. So as we were commencing our meeting, what happened was all our phones went off. And we all looked at our phones. And we saw the message, and we looked at each other. And immediately, General Logan responded by calling HI-EMA and trying to get all the information he could of what was happening. And as he did so, not quite, that was a very short time. Immediately after that, he turned to us and he said there was a false alarm. And so at that time, what I did was I started texting and informing some of my people and my family, actually, what was happening.
Okay, so essentially, for folks in your position, it was more about trying to get out the word that this was a false alarm.
Yes.
Okay, Dan Carlson, D.O.E., you had a lot of people out at a lot of schools, even though it was a non-school day, right? What was going through your mind, what you might have to do?
I was at home with my family, so I went to a bathroom with 7 others, and we hunkered down there. But immediately our phones started obviously just going crazy from internal D.O.E. communication, trying to kind of decipher what was going on. The fact that there were no sirens, obviously, I think was one of the first big indicators that it might be suspicious, but at that point, again, the DOE, I think, we learned a lot from it. We learned a lot about communication and making sure that we even have created, for example, text group message type situations. So I can hit one text and I can contact all the critical people that I need to contact at that time.
Were you thinking that, What were your thoughts? Did you have thoughts about the schools when you were during that period when you didn't know this was false?
And the other parts of our department, so again, our deputy and our superintendent were getting direct phone calls from principals who had activities maybe going on their different campuses. We had some soccer fields that were occupied. We had some other areas that, again, where people were at the schools or at the school sites. We're happy to say that the response was actually very positive, I would say. I would say our schools are very well in tune and prepared for these kind of things because they drill and they practice these routinely. So again, I think in some ways our keiki actually led some of the groups into how should we handle this?
Oh, because they know their campus, they know where they're supposed to go.
Exactly, and they know the procedure for this kind of situation. We train to shelter in place, and a lot of them have just reviewed that recently because there's been obviously increased attention towards this this situation, and we've been practicing those drills and ensuring that our schools have.
I'm sure we'll get back more to that, and I'm sure we'll get some questions too, so we'll probably circle back to that issue. Daryl Young from the Harbors Department, for yourself, what was going through your mind, and did you have like a checklist starting to go?
Well, I was down at Magic Island. My son paddles for a private school, and they were at a meet, so we're in between meets, and my wife and I were walking toward Ala Moana when it went off. Immediately, I was texting my incident command system, and within minutes, we kind of knew it was false. Again, there was no alarm. I did comment to Dan that I thought that day a lot of the kids actually were the leaders in some of their spots because they trained so well. The kids ran from Magic Island and went toward Ala Moana Center. They ended up in Planet Fitness, and I got to commend.
Oh, I remember that. I remember that video of them. Yeah, right.
They housed 200 plus kids in the locker rooms, and we heard anecdotal comments about how kids at Punahou in a soccer tournament all knew to get into the gym. All the kupuna went into the health room. At Kapolei, there was a coach that blew a whistle and gathered everyone into the gym. And on one hand, it's great that the kids know all this. On the other hand, it's kind of sad that we're training for all this. The active shooters.
As far as the Harbors, though, you mentioned incident command? You guys have people who
we have
are
incident command.
Who are there all the time?
On a normal situation, we'll do a text tree with all my district managers, as well as my administrator and my key staff. And again, we train well with HI-EMA on primarily hurricane events. And it's interesting because we'll take a Seaport Unified Command with us and Coast Guard. We're responsible for the cargo yards and about 50 feet from the edge of pier into the water. The rest of the water is all federal water.
Let me ask though, did you have a plan in place for a nuclear attack?
We knew to shelter in place. For example, that day we had 2 cruise ships in. So our harbor police was out there gathering everybody, taxi drivers, bus drivers, and putting them all into the public areas, not necessarily the secured areas, but in the public areas so that everyone was inside a building.
Oh, I see. So you have a shelter-in-place plan that's in place, and that was what got activated. Tim, for you, as a public information officer, you saw a lot of struggling with public information that day, but what were you going through?
Yeah, Saturday morning, so my wife and son and daughter, we were all home, just starting to get the day going. And, as the PIO for all the airports, harbors, and highways in the state, I'm used to having my phone around. So it was with me, so my work phone, my personal phone, and then my wife's mobile phone all went off at the same time. And the first thing that struck me was it was a different alert. I mean, I'm used to getting alerts and things, but it was a different sound. And, like I think a lot of people, you see the last line, this is not a drill, and that's certainly enough to get your attention. I, too, was suspicious by not hearing the sirens, but it was enough to get me into alert mode and start taking action. And so, I directed my son to start filling up water bottles like we do on any other natural disaster, that's coming, to start just in case, filling up waters, kind of bringing in food that was in the garage, maybe inside and things. I started making calls. And then, of course, going to the news and social media and things before I got the word right that it was a false alarm.
It occurs to me the viewers might be a little interested in what happens in a newsroom and something like that. And just from our own experience, right? So I got the alert at home. I was with my wife. Luckily, my kids lived on the mainland in college, so I wasn't too worried about that. But there's that momentary fear that you know, this can't really be real. There's no way this is real. They can't do this, you know. And then, but there's also that little moment where you say, oh, I better do something about this
Just in
personally,
case, right? That was what I was thinking too.
But yeah, no sirens. I tried to get on CNN, nothing on CNN. And then within, I think, 4 or 5 minutes, we were in contact with the police that were telling us no. And so our alert from Hawaii News Now's mobile app went out, I think within like, I want to say it was 8 minutes or 10 minutes of the alert. So at that point, we all went into work. And did you guys have to go to work? Everybody? No?
I did,
We
yeah.
were spending a lot of time communicating, at least, back and forth.
You guys were calling me right away.
Yeah, of course. Well, that was a whole other thing. Right. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the report that just came out from General Hara, which is really, to this date, the most comprehensive look we have. It was highly critical in a lot of ways. Let's look at the 7 people that contributed most to this report. Brigadier General Kenneth Hara, he authored the report. He was requested to do so by the governor. Harry Kim, Hawaii's county mayor, who's also a longtime civil defense expert. Chelsea Che, Dynamic Planning and Response CEO, so the private sector was involved there. David Lopez, a critical system planner with Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. Jeffrey Hickman, a Deputy State Public Affairs Officer, State of Hawaii Department of Defense. Michael Vinson, Deputy Attorney General. And Everett Kaneshige, Statewide Interoperability Coordinator, State Department of Defense. And this report, General Kauivi, what did you take away from this report that was the most important thing that you're carrying into your new role as interim director?
Well, the first thing is the strategic plan. That was at the top of General Hara's report. And one of the reasons why is because the agency, we do a lot of great things. When you're looking at the day-to-day operations, the administration's ability to respond to a storm, a natural disaster, hurricane, tsunami, earthquakes, they're very astute and adept at handling those issues, incidences, especially because we practiced them so much. You're looking at Hurricane Isel, the response there was great. The Puna lava flow is another one. The floods that occurred in the past. These things that the HI-EMA has been great at coordinating support for. And these are events that really occur as a far in advance when we get noticed. A hurricane usually takes a couple of days, you can see it coming, and so you slowly get up and ramp up to the actual incident. But when you're looking at where we are as far as organization and how we're looking at it from the top down or a bigger picture down, we're so busy doing these hazard mitigation plans, looking at response plans, looking at assistance, FEMA reimbursements. We are very good at those things. And rest assured, we've gotten a lot of hardworking guys doing FEMA reimbursements, but taking a bigger picture up, stepping out, looking at the organization as a whole is very important, because what we need to do for the strategic plan is ensure that HI-EMA, as well as the state, has a vision of where we want to be when it comes to safety, security, and response to natural disasters or man-made disasters.
You know, let me read this from the executive summary of this report. And it's a little bit of jargony, but let me give it a shot. It says, executive summary of the Hara report, the people of Hawaii expect the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency to be trained, ready, and prepared for all hazards. However, preparedness, deterring, mitigating, and reducing vulnerability, preventing, knowing what to do, responding to, and rapidly recovering from a major disaster requires a multi-tier, interoperable, and whole-of-community approach. Resultantly, preparedness for major disasters is resource-intensive. Let me ask Dan Carlson, you're at the D.O.E., you guys are always planning too, especially facility side. Sure. I mean, how do you balance the need for lots of resources for planning against just getting your job done?
It's a challenge, for sure. And again, I think in some of the more recent situations, the resources are becoming very critical. There's a lot of legislation out there right now tied to some of that when we're talking about the safety, security type issues. But and it's a balance. We're hopeful that we'll get some appropriations to help offset some of those costs. But those things that we might have to do for safety and security, which are obviously the most important, compete with everything else that we're trying to accomplish. So it is a challenge. It's a challenge that we face every day, but it's obviously, safety and security is usually paramount, obviously, and obviously outranks anything else.
And the thing is, though, about schools, too, is that you guys have got so many schools that you end up with a lot of your initiatives saying, okay, hey, school, you should be doing this.
Correct.
And do we know that all the schools are doing that, or how do you keep track of whether any given school has done what you're expecting them to do?
When it comes to the safety security issues and emergency preparedness, we ask the schools to do 5 different drills every year. So you got evacuation, tsunami, earthquake, shelter in place, and then a lockdown. We give the principals the latitude to do it whenever they need to during the year, but we do ask for quarterly safety reports where they report their evacuation drills. We also go out and help them determine what those drills should look like, help them develop their emergency action plans. And we monitor those every year. We, again, make sure that they've been looked at and submitted to us. And so I have a team of people that does that and obviously monitors. I mean, you bring up a good point. We have 256 schools. So you've got 256 principals. They all have different opinions as to how important some of this is. But
they're allowed to have that?
We certainly empower our principals. I'm not saying they do, but again, obviously, when you're dealing with the size and the quantity that you brought up, it's definitely a.
I just want to acknowledge a viewer question right on that point. We know schools practice fire drills and lockdown procedures. Does the DOE have plans for a new type of drill based on this type of threat? And I think this goes to the question of, when it comes to a nuclear attack, it's a different kind of situation than just a regular lockdown. There's a lot that you're directing schools to do, but they don't have resources to go buy stuff or, I mean, is the school ready, and is it really worth planning for a nuclear attack given the real likelihood of it?
Let me tell you what we have done. And again, we've given the guidance for, again, the reaction to this situation is clearly shelter in place. We've had numerous dialogues with HI-EMA. HI-EMA obviously is the lead agent in this kind of organization. We've coordinated with them. One of the bigger questions, again, that came out fairly recently, there was a change to the fact that we should have 2 weeks supply. And again, that has to do with harbors, and you guys are the experts on that. But that caused quite the concern on some of our parents and administrators. Do we really have to have 2 weeks supply? The intent isn't for a school to have 2 weeks supply. Now, we have determined that we probably should have maybe up to 48 hours worth of supplies of food and water at the schools. So if we did have to truly do a shelter in place, we would have the ability to last there for 48 hours. And this was, again, all coordinated with HI-EMA as far as what the anticipation was for the fallout. And
that's a good thing for anything, right?
It is, and we should all have that.
And I think, along those lines, it's nice to have 14 days worth of food and water on hand. But I think people have to understand, at any one time, we have 13 vessels moving back and forth between the West Coast or the Far East coming to Honolulu as its hub. And should there be an event, you will have at least 3 cargo ships that are coming in that need to be offloaded, right? We have to prioritize the cargo. We have to figure out what's on there, what needs to be pulled off, what needs to stay on. But one of the things we did in 2016 is we did an alternate port exercise with the Coast Guard as well as with HI-EMA.
Let me interrupt you just long enough to say, I guess we can, in this conversation, move on a little bit more to what kind of plans are in place. Now, one thing, in reading the HARA report, the HARA report, there was a lot of focus on the harbors, and I think that there was pretty strong language about the harbors aren't ready, and we have particularly if one harbor, Honolulu Harbor, obviously harbors are all in inundation zones.
Right.
For a tsunami or a hurricane, you could have harbors that got knocked out of commission. Is that what you're talking to right now?
And until we tested the alternate port theory back in 2016, I would generally concur with the broad brushstrokes that the report had. Since that time, though, we've been working with HI-EMA as well as the legislature and under Governor Ige. We actually did several things that we're looking at. We're undergoing the construction of the Kapalama Container Terminal, 84 acres, brand new, to accommodate the movement of cargo, but on the right side of the Sand Island Bridge. Right now, all of our overseas terminals is on Sand Island. Should that bridge ever go out, we're stuck. So we're building the 84-acre terminal on the correct side of the land side of Sand Island.
So Sand Island would act as a protective if you've got a tsunami.
Right. Right. So we'll have both a 135-acre terminal on Sand Island as well as an 84-acre terminal, both capable of handling overseas and gantry cranes. We have a jet fuel.
When is that going to be?
That should be finished in 2023. We groundbreak and the construction actually starts next week there. So that's the land side. Water side is coming in about a year. At the same time, we recognize the vulnerabilities we had on receiving jet fuel. We only can receive jet fuel right now at a certain pier on Sand Island. We're building a second one on Kapalama side, so you'll have redundancies there. We're building a fuel pier out in Kalailoa probably in about 5 years to be able to now move a lot more finished product to the neighbor islands, so we can use barges out on that side. One of the things we did in testing the alternate port scenario, which is Kilo Pier in Pearl Harbor, was we recognized that the lack of a laydown area or the area to store containers after we're done made that vulnerable. So what we've done now is we're taking a look at our nearest piers to Honolulu, the channel to Honolulu Harbor, piers 1 and 2. We have what we call a stick crane, so it's a single point crane rather than a gantry crane. But you still be able to move cargo off of there. We have piers 19.
You lost me a little bit. I
Yeah.
want to make sure I understand. So we're talking about Pearl Harbor as an alternate.
That was one of them. Originally, that was the only one.
Okay.
So what we've now done is look at 3 multiple ports on Honolulu. Should anything happen that closes off the Kapalama channel and the container terminals, we will still be able to bring in containers via tug and barge or what we call roll or roll on and roll off.
That's now.
That's now.
Okay, yeah, because we were talking about
Right.
5-6 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So now, if we talk about now,
Yeah.
a hurricane or tsunami tomorrow that
Right.
knocks off Sand Island,
Right.
you're saying that you could still move
Yeah. We
cargo
still-
through Honolulu Harbor.
We can still move cargo through
Or
Honolulu
through
Harbor, but
Honolulu.
not through the traditional way that you understand. Right now, we wouldn't be using container ships. We would be using what we call ocean-going tug and barge. But with the technology that has changed over the years, we can probably move the cargo with the stevedores and the techniques that they have almost as fast as we can do off of a gantry crane.
Okay, so just to, I know we're spending a lot of time
Right,
talking, you and I, but I think this is
Yeah.
something that's top of mind for a lot of people
Right.
because we've been working from this assumption that, well, basically, if we don't have 14 days worth of food in our house, we're going to starve.
No.
Okay, so keep going with no, because.
No, because we have a plan. We know where we're going to bring in the cargo. Again, if we were to have a situation, we would be bringing tug and barge and what we call roll or conroll ships, and it's the technology that has changed that allow us to do this, to deliver cargo at piers 1 and 2, piers 19 and 20, and piers 29 in Honolulu. So
All
that would
alternatives to Sand Island.
all alternatives to Sand Island. It won't be the same volume, but again, we're not bringing in the TVs and the sofas and all that. We'll be bringing in essentials.
So are we hooked up to the West Coast for that kind of supply chain?
And we'd be
Is
working
it
with-
rapid? How fast could it be?
We would be working with the shippers, right? We would tell them what piers are available, what the depth of water is, and they would bring the equipment. Kilo Pier would still be open to offload cargo destined for Central Oahu. And then Kalailoa, where we've situated a crane from Kahului to Kalailoa for that very resiliency
done
issue.
that?
Yeah, we've already done that, so it's already out there.
Let me ask, General, I imagine that, again, now what we're talking about is not necessarily nuclear attack, but
Mm-hmm.
if it's possible natural disaster that affects our harbors. What would be the military role in a scenario like that? We already talked a little bit about Pearl Harbor. Would the military also be helping out, and is there a plan for how that would work?
It depends on the disaster, of course, and what the assets you need. So the military will only get involved when civilian assets and all other assets or resources are pretty much depleted. So, for the most part, like for the National Guard, what our core areas that we're going to look at is when a natural disaster occurs, tsunami, whether it's a hurricane, is a lot of the debris clearance. Because you can get the ports open, but you got to get stuff off the ports out of the roadways. So a lot of our support going to be focused on stuff that the existing resources need more help with. For example, so while the DOT is going to be working on the ports, we're not going to necessarily be working on the ports with them. What we're going to be doing is trying to get the lines of communication, as we call it, which is the roadways and the areas, the roadways that connect the society and the areas where these items need to go.
Do you also get involved in the utility reconstruction?
Again,
So
for the most
you
part,
guys have a lot of bunch of generators. I know you.
yeah. So no, not so much reconstruction, unless again that would be like Corps of Engineers or something like that. Again, only the assets are out there only if it's needed. So at first, and I'll give you an example, like a smaller version, compartmentalized down in Puna, Hurricane Isel or Tropical Storm Isel. When you're looking at the assets already in play and how much personnel HICO had out there, really what they needed was somebody to help clear the roads. So Department of Transportation, the Public Works on the Hilo side, they all started clearing the debris off the roadways, and the National Guard was needed to assist so that he could get in and start putting up those utility poles and getting electricity back into the homes.
And that is also part of the already preparation plan, right? So if there's a Category 4 hurricane that comes out and there's debris on multiple roadways, there's already a plan in place that kind of prioritizes the areas that crews need to hit first. H1, H2, H3 not only are the most used and heavily by volume, the amount of cars in the island, but we also know they connect the military bases. So that's going to be the priority. Once those crews get in, to clear those areas first. Getting to the airport and the harbors will be next as well. So those are all priority roadways, followed down the line by the other areas of the high population and populated residential areas, but by all means, those are going to be the first areas to kind of clear the roadways. And even the plan is, to get the roadway open first. If there's a lot of debris on the roadway, they may push it off to the side. Don't worry about clearing it later, but the point is right away, immediately, is to get it open so that reinforcements can
Our goal would be whatever is brought in, we want to get it as deep into the community as we can so people travel the least.
Right.
Right?
And so, Tim, you also represent DOT tonight for us for the airport. One of the findings in this report was that we only had, I think, 5 days worth of jet fuel at Honolulu Airport. I would imagine, is that a problem, or is there a source of additional fuel that could come in?
It did say 4 to 5 days, but that's fuel on hand at the airport. But actually, there's much more than that. Especially if you account for the fuel capacity at Sand Island as well, which adds another 15 to 20 days. And at maximum capacity alone.
Okay, what's at Sand Island?
So Sand Island, the fuel tanks. So there's additional fuel
those fuel
tanks,
tanks
jet fuel
all
tanks.
along.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, as I explained, the reason why we have the two fueling areas in Honolulu Harbor is because the tanks are right there.
I see. So as long as those are operating.
Those are operable. There's maximum, when they're all at capacity, it's about 30 days. And that doesn't actually even include the local refineries that are working and can produce supply as well. So when you add that, there's even more.
Is that relationship, though, between those tanks and the airport such that they're hardened to the point there where if you had a storm of that size, you could have faith that you're going to be able to get the fuel across the lagoon?
Right, exactly. And that would be a priority area to go and make sure that fuel connection is still there. But if we're talking about an event of that magnitude, there's other things that we would do as well, like prioritizing. The non-essential flights and things would probably be grounded and put on hold to conserve and you keep it for that essential flights that are necessary in the event of a disaster.
Let me just give Dan Carlson a chance to pitch in. In most of these natural disaster scenarios, you already mentioned that in a nuclear disaster, you're not really thinking so much about 14 days anymore because you're going to get kids out of the schools if you can.
As possible.
But in terms of which potential disasters do you anticipate would actually have people at the schools? And does that also include sheltering people in schools? Is
certainly
that
does.
something that would happen?
We work, again, closely with HI-EMA and the individual counties. As a hurricane is approaching, decisions will be made at each of the county levels as to which schools we're going to open as shelters. We already have a pre-approved list that we would be picking those from. Once those decisions are made, we come up with a timeline when we're going to stand up the shelters and start inviting the people in. And that's basically to get beyond the impact of the hurricane. Once the impact has happened, then our focus really goes to getting the kids back in school as quickly as possible. That's going to help out all of society, if you will, just because mom and dad are going to probably be busy either doing their job or trying to get their house back together.
Let me ask you, are the schools in, I have this image of Puerto Rico in my mind, right? Which
I think we all do.
Hopefully we're a little more ready or resilient than they were, but would schools become housing, for example, for neighborhoods where there was a lot of housing wiped out?
They certainly could. Again, working this time more with the city and county and the Parks and Rec and some of those other facilities. Again, this would all be coordinated through HI-EMA. We would look to potentially move those folks into other facilities so we could open the schools. That would be a coordination drill. But it's not to say we wouldn't pick some schools and say, you know what, these schools are going to have to remain open as shelters if the need were.
Daryl Young from the Harbors. The other question that comes to us is, what about the neighbor islands in this scenario? Two questions I think there. One is, if the flow of cargo is slowed, are you able to get cargo from Honolulu to neighbor islands? Do you still have that hub and spoke thing going, or does that change? And number two, are there any alternate major harbors on the neighbor islands that if you really had a disaster in Honolulu?
We would probably continue to do tug and barge and Conroe Ro-Ro. Well, what's really good for us is our two larger partners, Pasha as well as Matson, are undergoing a vessel change-out. You probably know about this, the Aloha class vessels that are coming in, the Kanaloa class vessels that are coming in, which is Conroe, and then Pasha coming in with two Ohana class vessels that they're purchasing as well. With the Jean Ann and the Marjorie C that are currently in operation, they both have ramps, so you'll be able to do that.
So
ramp
these
type
are
of operation.
container ships that have
Ramps.
So you don't need the cranes.
No. And then Matson and Souse have flat barges that these are the ones that I was explaining can operate just as fast as a gantry crane operation, and where it's more what we call a pass operation. There's a forklift on the barge that moves it to a ledge, and then from the land side, another forklift picks it up and puts it in the yard. So it moves that quickly. As quickly as I can pass you something is how.
Okay, so just like Honolulu,
Yeah.
people might have to wait a little while, but then you prioritize what cargo is
Yeah,
moving too,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you're not doing,
But
you're not
to
doing the
add-
cars and this other stuff.
Yeah, but to answer your question about whether or not we could put a gantry crane on a neighbor island, just to put things into perspective, we have 5 linear miles of wharf here. We have 200 acres and 30 berths. On neighbor islands, we have maybe 30 acres and 4 piers. So, and then a lot of them, let's say Kahului and Hilo, they're close to the end of the runway, so we couldn't put a 300-foot
Plus,
gantry crane.
80% of the people are here.
Right.
Good question from a viewer. What is the plan for all the visitors who would be on island during a possible attack? And again, let's go to a devastating natural disaster as well. Does the responsibility fall solely on hotels, or does the state have other plans? We were talking earlier about the idea of evacuating.
Right.
General, what do we do with all those tourists who are here if the infrastructure can't really support that many people?
Well, first of all, like when a hurricane or even a tsunami, the hotels already have plans to really look at each area and each type of disaster. And when you're looking at a hurricane, also when the hurricane passes, one of the things it's going to be looking at is how do you get mass transportation, and how do you get the people from the hotels to possible staging areas designated. And there's plans out there for that, to the airport and to get them off of island. It's a pretty comprehensive plan. I could spend a lot of time here talking about it, but bottom line is there is a plan with the hotels in sequence to determine, and with the airlines, a comprehensive plan that allows for moving of tourists at certain times, at certain places, to staging areas, and from the staging areas, checking them in, and then at the appropriate time when the aircraft comes, take them to the airport. We don't want them going all to the airport.
I've covered that a couple of times when the airport just got swamped. Tim, we've seen how common it is for people to rush to the airport when something like that happens. I was on Kauai for Iniki, and the first thing that happened was all the tourists went to the airport. There were lines at the airport, and that's where those people ended up being for the disaster. Have they figured out a way to either prevent people from doing that, or are the airports ready to take in all those people now? I mean, cell towers all went out. There was not water. There was not bathrooms. And if we were working together at that time. But are the airports ready for the kind of rush and anticipating this kind of evacuation?
Certainly, and there are plans in place. And I think one of the things to kind of mention, to be frank, I mean, yes, we're out in the middle of the ocean, and that is an issue. But it could turn into positive as well. We're out in the middle of the ocean, and in a crisis situation, we're all working together. So I'm a part of the emergency working group at the airport, for example, which meets monthly and plans for disasters. You know, we realize that in a catastrophic situation, some of the airlines may have a day or two before their reinforcements come in. That's why some of the larger carriers will help out some of the smaller carriers, or vice versa, to have those resources to be able to respond in a situation like this. Yeah, in some cases, it may not be best for everybody to come to the airport. I mean, it may be better for them to stay at the hotel or wherever they are until, you know, their airline is back in service and the flights have restored as normal. So to answer the question of do we have a way to get out of them? Yeah, I mean, word to people. I think in this day and age, it is helpful having the internet, having social media. A lot of times, most of the major airlines now have a direct way to contact you. If you leave your cell phone number or mobile number, they can give you alerts for your specific flight. So it's important to pay attention to those. People should check with their airline as well in advance before heading to the airport, just to make sure, just to avoid some frustration even, you know, if their flight is delayed and isn't scheduled for another day or so.
Do we know whether the airlines have specific plans for that kind of communication for a place like Hawaii that has kind of a specific issue?
Absolutely, yeah. There's definitely communication in place. They all have go bags. They all have contingency plans. There's a plan in place if the masses do come to airports to have water runs and granola bar runs and things like that in order to help people and try to get the communication out to those folks to let them know what they can expect. Because I think a lot of the time is if people you know, might understand in an event that their plane is not going to take off on time. But where it might be frustrating is just the not knowing and things. So there are definitely plans, communications, and it's talked about a lot in this emergency working group as well, just about how to get that word to people.
Okay, let me go to one more graphic here. This is another excerpt from this report, and I think this is going to turn us to a section of our program that's going to be dominated by questions. I'm telling you, I'm getting a lot of questions. And a lot of them are going back to the nuclear issue. People want to hear more about that. So this is, again, from the HARA report. Hawaii faces a daunting task of building capacity for resilience and preparedness, given our challenges across multiple domains and functions. Our problem is to quickly develop a baseline assessment where we need to be and how we're going to get there. This report provides immediate action requirements in response to the January 13th false missile alert, and also recommends long-term considerations for all hazard preparedness improvement that should be enduring. We've been talking a lot about the all hazard preparedness improvement, but I'm getting a lot of calls about nuclear preparations. And General, let me start with you on this one. You know, if a missile attack were to have happened, would we have been able to handle 100,000 casualties and care for survivors? We have no shelters. There's two for the price of one in that question. One of the things that Mayor Kim said was that, you know, we probably shouldn't have set up this alert system before we had this kind of planning. Are we how far are we until we have a plan for something like this truly to handle it?
Well, like what General Hara's report also says is we need to have what they call a CBRN, a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear annex to the all hazards plan. So really what he's saying is that basically what the concern is of the viewer is we need to develop that plan. For a mass type of event like that. Now, I'll be honest with you, when you're looking at the existing systems in place with the first responders and how we respond to a all hazards incident, we have the ability to actually at least respond and do some mitigation when that occurs. National Guard, for example, we have the 93rd CST, Civil Support Team, with some weapons of mass destruction. Their job is to go out and do surveys to determine what level extent the radiological contamination is occurring and come and report back. We also have what we call the CBRNE Enhanced Response Force Package. We call it SURF-P for short in the Hawaii National Guard. And with that, we have a mass decontamination unit. We also have a search and extraction unit that is able to go in with protective gear to assist first responders, especially the fire departments, in collapsed structures to get people out. And we also have a medical section with that to assist so that we can divert people as we rescue them through the medical lanes as well as the decontamination lanes.
You know, just to follow up a little bit, you know, this caller mentions 100,000 casualties. I think I did see a Hawaii Association of Hospital Healthcare Association assessment that basically says the answer to that is kind of no. We'd have to get, some people would be left, you triage, but you'd have to get a lot of people off the island ultimately, right?
Yes.
And then how would we do that?
Getting the people off the island? Mm-hmm. Well, again, like we go back to what I talked about earlier with the mass casualty, well, not mass casualty, mass transportation plan.
Okay.
So you'd have to
so that also involves civilian areas as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you'd have to set up with a mass transportation plan to get people off island. You have staging areas that designated. You have the transportation system existing through the bus system and the tourist system to take the people from where they are to those staging areas, and then ensure that they're staged, talking with the airports to determine when those flights come in. And then, depending on the availability of transport, either transporting them or they may have to walk, we don't know, depending on, again, the disaster. When you're talking something at 100,000 people, that's a lot of people. And casualties is, it's a blanket statement when you say 100,000 casualties. I mean, are they walking wounded? Are they,
right.
Are they litter? Yeah. So the dynamics with that, it's difficult to say specifically what you're going to do. But I can tell you right now, there is plans in place that if you are able to get off island because you're physically able to, a plan is in place to be executed so that people are not flooding the airports. They're staged. Either they're at they're at their hotels, and they're going to to the staging areas. Then they go to the airport.
Yeah. So as that increased my understanding, because you're talking about the whole island or an island and so on. Daryl Young from Harbors, would people be able to get on those empty cargo ships that have brought in stuff and get out? I mean, is that part of the plan?
I mean, we'd probably be. It's not something we looked at.
You don't need a lot of people wandering around on the harbor.
Yeah,
when we're a secured area, so you'd have to have what we call TWIC cars in order to get in.
No, yeah, it's people like to think about we can get on ships and stuff like that, but really what we gotta have is a methodical approach to getting off of island, and we already have that with the airlines coming in and going out.
It's interesting to me is, and to all of you in the panel, a lot of this does require, and I think a big part of the plan was explaining to people what they're supposed to do. Right. I've got some questions here, what are we talking about other natural disasters in old reports? What's the new plan for nuclear threats? What's the government's plan to control mass hysteria? No one's talking about the 13 minutes we have to wait for missile impact. What do you advise people to do in 13 minutes? These are all questions that people have even after the massive public information campaign. I mean, what do you guys think in terms of, the public information? Tim is the public information professional here. I mean, does all this stuff that everyone's explaining have to be explained to people in advance so they get a level of comfort? What do you think about that?
Well, it is absolutely true. 12 to 15 minutes is not a lot of time to prepare for what could be an impending disaster, right? I will say, fortunately, people of Hawaii seem to keep their cool very well in this event. I mean, there were no cases of major accidents in the whole time when the missile alert was going on any of the roadways, which is phenomenal.
Not a close one.
Yeah, well, but they weren't, right? And I mean, so even though there was that increased sense of urgency, people did keep their composure. If people are on the roadway and they get that missile alert, there are options that they can do. I mean, like, for example, on H3, anybody who's on there knew that 11 miles and you're not exiting, but some people wanted to make a U-turn at the tunnel. Our operator who's there, someone who's there 24/7, rightly so, just lifted the gate, let them make a U-turn to turn around up at the tunnel. Some people pulled over on the side of the highway in the tunnel, which is absolutely fine in a situation like this, although we do urge people to move all the way off the roadway. Don't block the lanes because someone else could be coming from behind, and you don't want to obviously cause an accident trying to avoid an incident, right, and things.
But I think that the reason that there's confusion is partly because we've done such a good job on telling people what to do on long lead incidents, right? Hurricane, tsunami, you know, for the harbors, we're going to move everybody out, right? You go to higher ground, you do all that kind of thing. On a short lead incident, you're doing exactly the opposite of what you're thinking about. You're going to shelter in place, you're going to get into a hardened building, and you're going to get there as quickly as you can and just hunker down until it's over.
Yes. And so, exactly what Daryl's saying is, when you're looking at what we're trying to do as far as HI-EMA, we actually had over 40 community engagements with various communities out there. You know, when you look at the population, it's very small. We only had about over 2,000 people present total on those various occasions. But the words we were trying to get out were exactly that. Get to a protective place as best as possible. Protection is better than just staying out in the open. Get into an enclosed area, home, everything. Get in the middle. Wait until that you get the, all clear, or wait until you get more information, because there's not much you can do in 15 minutes. I mean, so the only thing you can do is get into a hardened facility if you can. Because...
And if not, get within as best you can. A windowless room inside of a house is about the best you can do.
That's the best you can do.
When you don't want to spend 10 minutes getting to the best place, sometimes it just takes 30 seconds to get to a safe place.
I think along what we were talking about earlier too is that communication. We've been at this since, we've always had the shelter-in-place drill, and that was always the reaction to a situation like this. It wasn't until last summer where things kind of started changing the picture there a little bit. And I mean, we started an information campaign in August and September, and again, continue to engage our complex area superintendents and our principals, again, with what are the right procedures, what is it you're supposed to be doing. But it is, I mean, it's just a matter of continually getting that message out.
Yeah.
And
You know, General, you're the one, I think, more than anyone at this table, although maybe in your Air Force career, that's actually been hands-on involved with disaster response. Do you find that people kind of go blank and need to be re-educated at a moment of this kind of time, or do they really carry in the drumbeat they might have heard for years, but then, how difficult is it to instruct people on what to do?
But yeah, through my experience, actually, you get a wide gamut of responses. I mean, and I've been doing this since Hurricane Iniki. I was a young lieutenant responding to Hurricane Iniki, and I can tell you a whole bunch of stories about that, as well as throughout my career, 2,000 floods on the Big Island, Hurricane Isaiah, Puna lava flow, all the way through. So, I've seen people react differently, and some people do. They kind of wait for someone to tell them something because then they're not sure. While others, they know exactly what to do. In fact, I went back to Hilo a couple weeks back, and I talked to one of my old police officer co-workers when I used to be a police officer, and asked them, what did you do? And she's the juvenile aid section lieutenant on the Big Island in Hawaii County Police Department. And she said, we got our family, we got in the middle of the house, we sat down and we waited. And then all of a sudden, we waited and we talked to each other. And then, when we found out it was all clear, then we said, oh, good, everything's okay. But that's the ideal response when you had other types of responses, obviously.
People running pell-mell across the campus at UH. Let me throw a couple more questions, because we've only got about 5 or 6 minutes left. That's how fast time goes. Will our state start building shelters on our islands? Will the military help? I live on Leeward, Oahu. Dan, I know that you're involved in shelter planning involving a lot of school properties. I mean, are we getting there? Is that going to happen? I mean, nuclear shelters I don't think are going to happen, but I mean, are we strengthening schools? Are we making them?
We are, and there's some initiatives along that front too. Like I said, there's some legislation out there right now encouraging us to do exactly that, working with HI-EMA. The reality is, at least at the schools, we have 256 schools. They're in all the communities. So we have a very detailed long list of schools that can be used as shelters. There are a handful that can't. Again, our wooden structures or some of these structures that we've deemed with the structural engineers going out, just not suitable for shelters. But I think the good thing is we do have them, and we do have them in all the communities. So as we monitor a hurricane in particular, its approach and where it's most likely going to hit, we can open the appropriate amount of shelters.
You know, one of my colleagues was out with his kids at like a soccer match when the alert came, and phones weren't working, you know, so he bundled up the kids, he drove, and the first place he drove to was a school. And he said, if it's not open, I'm going to break into that school, because that was the strongest building in his neighborhood. Is there a plan to inform communities about the appropriate use of a school as a shelter?
Yes, and I think we've been actively doing that. Just like HI-EMA, we've been involved in a number of town hall meetings, a number of communications, a number of different initiatives to try and get that word out. If the schools aren't open, the problem with something like this in a nuclear kind of situation, there most likely just isn't enough time to get someone there to open the school per se.
Right.
So
well, people might take that in their own hands, but
right.
General?
Well, you know, we can talk about shelters being built and people go to shelters, but really what I think, and this is my personal opinion, is that we have to change the paradigm of how people think about protection. And one of the reasons why is because you look at the population on Oahu. I mean, there's not enough shelters you can build to protect every single person. And what you really want to do is look at trying to harden your own home. If you are able to, I would recommend you do research, and if you have the funds, to try and harden your own home. Because there's no better place to be sheltered than your own home. And I'll give you an example of things like, I was talking to my preparedness branch officer, and she did research on this, and she stated that when you're looking at the Hurricane Andrew for Florida and what happened there, immediately after that, the building codes changed for Florida, and they hardened their buildings. And you look at today, right after the hurricane they just had, they discovered that all the buildings that were built to the codes that they instituted after Hurricane Andrew were still standing. And that's the way you want to be. You don't want to be running to a shelter if you don't have to. So really, what you really want to try and do is really try and see if you can shelter home. I'll give you another example. I was in Guam a couple of years ago. And Guam has strict building codes. And in fact, insurance companies have made it clear to Guam homeowners that will not insure your home unless you have a certain structure. And while I was down in Guam, I noticed the structures, and I always wondered prior to being down in Guam, how did the Guam stay resilient? And when I went there, I realized why. Because their infrastructure is resilient, their homes are resilient. While I was there, a storm was passing through, and it was flooding. And I was thinking, man, if this was Oahu, I mean, a lot of things would be happening right now. But immediately after the storm was over the next day, it was business as usual. It was business as usual. The homes over there are sturdy. The utility poles are sturdy. And they're ready.
That's a whole other issue about the utility side. Daryl Young from Harbors, have you folks, and Tim, you can pitch in on this too when it comes to airports and other transportation facilities, are we hardened up to a certain degree against a hurricane of a certain, I mean, how big a hurricane could Honolulu Harbor handle without, catastrophic damage?
Right now, we have certain areas that we know we need to fix. I mean, we have older piers, but we're actually undergoing a Honolulu Harbor Master Plan update where we're going to identify areas like the piers I mentioned earlier, that there's going to be certain areas that we harden just for the primary purpose of making sure we can land tug and barge and ro-ro operations. So what can we withstand right now? Not really certain because we haven't been tested.
You know those big cranes?
Yeah.
Do we know what they're rated for?
I think they're rated for Category 4.
Which is 110, 115?
So the idea is what we're going to do is there's D rings that you put in, you hook into the wheels and you lock them in.
Well, the thing about a Category 4 coming, let's say, for example, I mean, is that's at least that long lead disaster where you have some time to prepare. So the preparation and protocols go into place where you strategically place your heavy equipment that you might need to clear the runway or something in the immediate after fact in an area where it's going to be protected. You start tying down and securing any equipment or things outside to make sure if it is a high wind event that it's not going to get airborne and become a projectile. So those things are taken care of as well. The buildings itself are strong. While there could be some roofing and things like that might come apart in a Category 4, those preparations are taken in advance beforehand at the harbors and on the highways as well, construction sites as well. They'll go and work with the contractors and do the same thing, make sure things are tied down, make sure the drains are cleared, to prevent flooding. All those things that are capable of being done in advance are being done in advance and have been
I was just saying, Dan, I mean, I'm picturing a principal of a school who's facing this, and you might want to do this preparation so the school can open as soon as possible. All the kids are at home, theoretically, at a long-term emergency, but do the schools individually have the resources for the kind of thing Tim is describing, where you strengthen, you clear drains, you make sure your water supplies are ready?
I would say they can always be resourced more, but we do have the appropriate amount of resources to do some of the basic things. And again, it's the tying things down, it's the securing things, it's the clearing the drains. It would take a group effort, but the custodians, along with the administrators, I think, are more than capable.
Is that part of the plan, though? Are they supposed to prepare the schools in advance?
It's all part of our education, and again, part of what we talk about when we talk about our hurricane preparedness and opening shelters and these
General, we're down to the last 30 seconds. I'll give you the last word. What taking away from this program, what would you like the public to know?
Go back to the shelters thing. Everybody's concerned about shelters. It's one of the main questions asked. Where do I go if something happens? I would say, really, what you want to try and do right now is really try and see if you can harden your own area. Harden your home. Protect your family. It's better to shelter at home than it is to go to a shelter.
Okay, very good. Gentlemen, all of you, I have to say thank you. Usually I have time to say thank you individually to everybody, but we don't. We decided to let things go a little bit longer, and I really appreciate it. I want to thank our audience tonight, and that's Insights for this week. Next week, we'll be talking about the working poor. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Good night.